broadcasting to you from undisclosed locations throughout the world.
Live from nowhere.
Crew Room.
Hello, and welcome to our next episode of Crew Room, here on Live from Nowhere. I'm Gordon French, and I spent the last 20 years managing Rudy's Music in New York City. And today, I'll be hosting our episode all about guitars. You can learn more about Live from Nowhere and how we support entertainment industry professionals by visiting our website, www.livefromnowhere.org. So I'm going to start off by introducing everybody we have and giving them a second to tell you about themselves. We're going to start off with Ernie Bailey.
Hey everybody, my name's Ernie Bailey, and I started working on guitars in 1977 and 78 and built my first guitar right around that period of time. By 1982, I was working in a repair shop, and then a decade later, that led to work on the road, going out with Nirvana, which led to the Foo Fighters. Then I took some time off to play in some bands, and then recently I've been back out with Brandy Carlisle and doing a bunch of one-offs with some others. So that's me.
Nice. And then we're going to move on to Michael Bethencourt.
Howdy, Michael Bethencourt here from Tyler, Texas originally. Kind of came up touring in the kind of like punk scene, played and then teched for different bands like Newfound Glory and Bayside and those kinds of acts, and then kind of moved on eventually, and have worked with My Morning Jacket and Alison Krauss and Lyle Lovett. I've been with Jason Isbell now. Have been for about the last 5 years, and going well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us. Brad, why don't you tell us about yourself? Brad Clifford.
Hey, I'm Brad Clifford. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin originally, and I live in Seattle, Washington now. I played in my own bands and toured for like 10 or 15 years before starting teching. I just didn't want to stop touring and thought I would segue into that. I worked in a similar group of bands as Michael, like Taking Back Sunday and things like that. And then I worked for the Gaslight Anthem and Against Me for a number of years. And lately I work for Mastodon and Slipknot.
Nice. That's awesome. We've also got Dan Mancini. I'm from New York, so I have to call you Dan Mancini. Dan, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, Paisano. Sorry, I can't help but think of the classic Simpsons character Phil Hartman used to play. It's like, hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might remember me from such films as Sack Lunch. But anyway, I'm Dan Mancini. I'm originally from the Boston area. You might remember me from such tours as Jack White, the Raconteurs, Brandy Carlisle, a bunch of other stuff. And grew up playing in punk and hardcore bands and stumbled into this like the rest of us. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So, moving on to Jesse Quitzland. Jesse, tell us about yourself. I feel like a game show host right now. This is awesome.
My name's Jesse Quitzland. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and continuing the punk rock theme here, I started off fixing guitars when I was in high school and just started, taking care of gear for various DC punk bands and then jumping on stage and helping out when things would break. And then as bands started kind of touring and having some budgets in the 90s, started actually going out on the road and never really tried to make a career out of that. But one thing led to another. And then meanwhile have repaired gears over the years, gotten really into tube amps, and I build custom tube amps under the Acme name here, and live in Seattle, Washington now, where I work in a guitar shop repairing gear and try not to tour.
Check out your website. The amps look awesome. I love that you make it silver tone.
Yeah, that's right.
That's super cool. So the last guy we have with us is Josh Scheibeis. Did I get that right, or did I butcher it?
Schreibeis, close enough. It's been my whole life has been something at the end of it, so it's always been a thing. I'm Josh Schreibeis. I'm from Massachusetts originally. I live in Nashville, Tennessee now. I started teching 2008. I kind of fell into it by accident through a buddy who hired me, who also fell into it by accident. Started off in like the pop rock world, bands like Boys Like Girls and The Academy Is and stuff like that. And then I kind of progressed on and got out of that, Young the Giant. And then I started moving on to like Bruce Springsteen, John Mayer, Pearl Jam, bands like that. And yeah, just here in Nashville, I build guitar rigs, pedal boards and stuff here, and when I'm not on the road with those guys. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Worked with a couple of people.
Yeah, a couple people.
When I started talking to the guys from Live from Nowhere, they had a suggestion that we might start off with a little quiz. So we've worked up this little complete the lyrics. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. Finish the lyric. Once I was blank. Mama told me, go make yourself some friends, or you'll probably be lonely. Answer number A, all by myself. Answer number B, super depressed. Or C, 7 years old. All right, guys, what do we got? What's the consensus? All right, we've got some B's, we've got some A's, we've got some C's. Ernie's got a C too. The answer is 7 years old. C.
Ernie, nice.
It was a wild shot in the dark for me.
Same here.
All right. Tell me why ain't nothing but A, friendship, B, heartache, C, table. You guys appear to be some Backstreet Boys fans. B it is.
Oh, so these are songs that actually exist. We're not just writing lyrics.
I mean, we may use them later. Recycle a little bit, why not? All right. There's vomit on his sweater already. Mom's blank. Going crazy? B, spaghetti. C, calling. You guys are getting way too fast at this.
All for the sake of rhyming.
I mean, it's all, you're making up ruining my entire game show host theme, you know? We have primarily B with spaghetti, which is the correct answer, Eminem. Although going crazy did make sense. All right. Lately, I've been thinking I want you to be A, happier, B, missing me, or C, here. This is the first one that's really stumped you guys. The answer is A, happier. Song is apparently called Happier by Marshmello.
I was banking on the rhyme.
I mean, the rhyme was
Ice is a big
choice.
Marshmello fan.
Yeah, we did a bunch of radio shows to those guys. So that song was just like beat into our brains over the span of one December.
Yes.
That's how most of us learn most of our lyrics.
Like, man, if I ever hear the song again, it'll be too soon.
I hope we didn't.
Yeah, Gordon, do you know Baby Shark?
Oh God, please don't mention Baby Shark, Michael. Why'd you go there?
You love Baby Shark.
My kid's school has been sending work at home stuff, and one of them is Baby Shark abs routine for the gym class. It beat in just a little bit more. It's fantastic.
Perfect.
All right, where are we now? Mama don't like you, and she, A, is picky, B, likes everyone, C, told me so.
Gotta be B.
Got B's, we've got B's, we've got B's. We have one C, Dan. Two C's, Jesse. The answer is B, likes everyone by Justin Bieber. His mom, really nice, super forgiving, very sweet. Not for you guys so much, but for everyone else. All right, got me spread like a blank. Bon appetit baby. A, eagle. B, dinner. C, buffet. I like that you went with eagle, Michael. That's freaking awesome. The answer is C, buffet.
I like Michael's answer better.
I honestly, that was what I was going for, just logically. Makes sense.
I mean, those are the lyrics to the song that I sing to myself every day. I just went with that.
Whatever brings you comfort at night, you know?
Yeah.
I've learned to lose you, can't afford to, tore my blank to stop you bleeding. A, sheet, B, heart, or C, shirts? Dan's got B for hearts. Jesse, C. Michael, B. We've got an A from Ernie, a C from Josh. Brad's got a C. The correct answer is C for shirts. Billie Eilish. And last but not least, California girls. We're unforgettable. Daisy Dukes, blank on top. A, crop tops. B, bikinis. C, bracelets. Got an A from Dan, a couple of B's here. 3 B's, 4 B's, 2 A's, 1 B. The answer is B, bikini. I was going for bracelets. I thought that would have been the more creative lyric.
Yeah, is that the Fugazi lyric, right?
It is the Fugazi lyric.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Covered by Katy Perry, but yeah.
How did I miss that?
Yeah. It's funny, it's like the 4th time Fugazi's come up in my personal life in the last week.
That's a good
It's always
week.
a good thing in my mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, thanks for being here, everybody. This is really awesome. When we started talking, the idea of getting together and talking to guitar techs was just, to me, like an easy thing. I've spent a lot of time meeting some of you guys in the store and just talking to a number of techs over the years. And the idea of being able to support everybody I know who all of a sudden doesn't have a job just seemed like a really natural fit and something I was eager to get involved in. So just kind of starting off, I mean, the first question I had is, people don't exactly put ads on LinkedIn for guitar tech. How did everybody find their way into the business? How do you get into being a guitar tech? You should all scream out at the same time. It's the best way to answer these.
Well, it's either being in the right or the wrong place at the right time.
Yeah.
That's a good
Depending
answer.
on how it turns out. Yeah.
Probably no different from anyone. Like, I would assume that most of us played different instruments growing up and eventually just learned to take care of them on our own. Whether it was a guitar, bass, or pedal board or whatever it was, we just kind of had to figure out how to fix stuff. And for me, like, once an opportunity presented itself where I could do that more seriously and also in exchange for money, it made a lot of sense. It was something I loved to do, and something I found myself not the worst at, and kind of took it from there.
Yeah, it seems like most of us have that like DIY kind of punk rock spirit where it's like, hey, we don't have a lot of money, but I don't know, we get some good attitude, so let's figure it out, like fix it ourselves. Like, I don't know, just kind of spirals from there, it seems like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
it's
kind of
funny. I mean, in the shop, it always kills me. Most of the kids who come and start playing can't tune without a tuner anymore. Most people can't troubleshoot their own stuff. The whole idea of the DIY punk thing just makes a lot of sense. So for me, if I couldn't figure out how it, if I didn't know how it worked, I figured it out because it was easier than buying a new one.
Yeah. And I think there also is something about like when someone does something like just for the love of it and it's like a passion thing, it's like, I don't know about you guys, but I spend most of my time touring in bands where I was making almost no money, sleeping on floors, like just kind of making it happen. And like that kind of attitude and like mindset seems to go like really far. I don't know, and just helping bands out, just making it happen,
Yeah, and once you get up to like the next level and you're touring with bands that have budgets big and small, like there's one common thing that goes for all of them. They appreciate when you take care of their money and you're not just throwing a bunch of money at a dumb problem. Instead, you're like using your brain to fix stuff and
For sure.
like taking the your own motivation to like make their show better, make their gear better, but not spending $1,200 here and $4,000 there. Like getting it done within your own thing is a valuable thing.
Yeah, definitely seems like a lot of techs do come from like punk and hardcore kind of backgrounds, probably because that ethos is kind of built in there pretty young, that you don't have to have the proper training. You just have to be good at problem solving and thinking on your toes and getting it done with what you have. That DIY ethic transforms into a lot of other aspects.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said. Like you guys, I grew up playing hardcore and punk bands and stuff like that. And it's like, it's one thing to be out doing shows and suddenly you got one guitar and that guitar goes down and you're the only one there that can fix it or cares about it. Like, that's kind of where that like Dan was saying, that thought process comes from. Like, I got to make this work. And, that goes a long way as far as like getting into this whole world. You kind of carry that along with you as you keep going, and you just always want to solve the next problem as it comes up.
I remember pretty specifically too, as a kid, like in my neighborhood, seeing people like build and work on their own motorcycles. And for some reason, like this whole idea was just kind of mind blowing that, this person was taking parts or inanimate, objects and making something that was completely useful. So I think as I move forward in life, like looking at things like broken amps and pedals and guitars that were decommissioned, I remembered those people, and that was a big thing. I really wanted to be like one of these people that made things like come back to life again. So, parthenogenesis.
And I was lucky enough, like I feel like my kind of connection with my dad was he was a mechanic and he was always fixing stuff and, teaching me young on like how to work on our dirt bikes and, problem solving, troubleshooting, stuff like that. So that was kind of our bond, like, and all the Mancinis are all just like fixers, tinkers, mechanics, HVAC. Like I'm just kind of lucky enough that I figured out how to do exactly what everyone else does, just with guitars and amps and touring. So I feel fortunate to have had that experience. So totally with the motorcycle thing. And that's still kind of in what I do today, where it's like, that's kind of what I'm excited about right now. So it's pretty fun.
Did any of you guys have formal training, or did you just kind of get into it and trial by error, as it were?
Well, I know, talking about kind of having the experience of as a kid of I just loved taking things apart to see how they worked, and then realized that I had to kind of put them back together, especially when it was like my dad's turntable or something like that. But I did actually study industrial design when I was in college, so that informs a lot of, especially like kind of process of fixing and building things. And also, I feel like a big part of what we do beyond fixing things is communicating with our artists and clients, and figuring out how to hear what somebody else is trying to hear and interpret what their language is, which might not be technical at all. Usually it isn't. And that's something else. I think, some of the stuff that I did in school kind of made me appreciate how much like communication and sort of, you have to communicate with somebody who might not be technical at all and make them feel comfortable about what you're doing. And then on the other hand, try to listen between the words of what they're saying to kind of translate that into a technical solution. It never ceases to amaze me how, for people who are working with really technical equipment all the time, a lot of artists just don't have any interest really or inclination to, technical understanding of what they do, which is fine, because that's very different than making music in a way,
It's funny, years ago in the shop, we used to be right by Quad recording studio, and we shared an elevator. We actually went up to our repair room, went up to their studio. I actually remember Paul McCartney was upstairs filming something, doing some sort of series. And one of my boss's daughters ran into him in the elevator, and they started chatting. He was like, "Oh, if you have any lefties, bring them up." And we happened to have had a 57 Strat that was like drop dead mint, left-handed. And one of the guys who works there brought it upstairs to him and came back with this story that we've debated endlessly for years, which was, he played the guitar, checked it out a little bit, and was like, "So what are these knobs down here to?" Just volumes and tones. "Oh, yeah, I've never really had a Strat of my own. They just hand me the guitar and I play." That kind of speaks to what you're saying, Jesse.
It's good. If you can take that thought away from someone, it's like, I don't know, I think Jesse totally has like a great point where like a lot of it is being technically proficient and, knowing what you're doing and being confident. But I think a lot of it is like, kind of like, I don't know that you can really teach it that well, but it's like being able to read a room and kind of read what a player is needing or wanting, or, really caring about the things that they care about, or the other side, like really caring about the things that they don't give a shit about at all. And like, just kind of understanding that like different players are going to have totally different needs, and you don't have to agree or understand it. You just kind of have to, read that room and know how to go with it, really.
Yeah, there's definitely a psychology to what we do, and not in a manipulative sense, but just making someone comfortable with what you're doing and continuing to believe in what you're doing, so they can, go on stage and trust you, and, not have to worry about things being bad or being good, just knowing they are what they are and that everything's going to work. So you don't want to.
In a certain sense, you guys end up being not just guitar whisperers, but guitarist whisperers.
Something like that. I mean, I certainly don't want to like oversell myself or overstate my importance to like an artist process, but just kind of being out of the way, uh, and just getting things to him at the right time and the right condition it goes a long way.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of trust in like a lot of those relationships. You know, certain jobs you don't see the person that you work for until like the intro's rolling and they walk the stage or something like that. So
Yeah.
being able to hand them a guitar and be like, yeah, we all did sound check as a crew. Like I made these changes or something's exactly the same as it has been, like whatever it may be. And having someone like building that relationship where they don't question it. Or if something was a little different yesterday that they did or didn't prefer, knowing that you care about that probably more than they do. And that you've done the best solution that they trust is like it's like a bond that really is important to the job at certain levels, I think.
How much input do you guys get into kind of shaping their tone through the course of a tour or in a studio? I mean, it's a relationship business. Same thing as selling a guitar. I mean, we all know each other. We have to do this in person. We have to deal with each other. As you guys develop that though, I mean, do you feel like you get a lot of input with most artists, or are most people open, or are there a lot of guys who are just total, tone junkies? They have it dialed in. You just got to do it exactly the way they want it.
I think that it kind of depends, because you got the guys who are super technical that endless pursuit of tone is just always there and it'll never go away. And they're the guys who are bringing in a new pedal every single day, showing up with a new guitar. I want to put these pickups in, blah, blah, blah. And then you got the other guys who just like, I want it to work. I want it to sound good. Do what you got to do. I trust you. I just want to go out and play. I want to play guitar. I don't want to worry about my amps. I don't want to worry about anything else. I just want to play. And I feel like the two ends of the spectrum, you kind of get one or the other. There's very little in the middle ground there. Mm-hmm. And sure. It's interesting. And you got to navigate both those personalities differently, where sometimes you got to tell the guy who's like bringing in all this stuff, I want to try this, and this. And you got to go, I don't think that's a good idea. And they're like, well, why? And, it's like, well, okay, let's, you got to, it's all a balancing act of how you navigate those kind of conversations. But, yeah, it's like Michael said, it's there's a little bit of psychology involved in kind of like knowing what your guy wants without, even if he doesn't know that he wants it, and kind of and getting there before he asking the questions that he didn't even know like, oh, what do you think about this? I never thought about that before. Well, let's try it out, and it's an interesting relationship between artists and their techs for sure.
And I love both ends of the spectrum too. Like I love when I work for some bands where it's super scrappy punk rock. They'll show up with a little tote bag and it's just got pedals and little scrap tape, and I'll get a piece of cardboard from the trash and I'll make like a little, taped up pedal board, and you just have to take charge and like you do your thing. And then the other side where you're working for someone really seasoned and like really knows exactly what they want, and you just kind of sit down, shut up, enjoy the ride, and just like go with it. Like I really love but I think you do have to be quite dynamic, like with how you're saying, like you got to be able to work with both sides of it, because it keeps you busy, really.
Right.
So for all you guys, you spend a ton of time on the road, like getting into this business. How easy is it to kind of click in and out of that? Because you're working from home. A lot of you guys build your own instruments, build pedal boards, amplifiers. How hard is it to kind of adapt to getting into the whole lifestyle of actually spending so much time on the road?
For me, I love it. Like since my very first tour, I felt really drawn to it. So even like the worst day on tour where you just really want to be home, like there's still a lot of positives in it. There's like, I don't know, I have these like weird romantic feelings about like shows and everyone going there and how far in advance people look forward to going to these gigs and playing a small part in like helping that be the best day for the players and for the crowd and all that. And I find like a lot of reward in just like simple things like that. So it is easy for me, at least, when it's hard and when it's like super long tours that are difficult, to kind of stay positive.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say that's appealed to me about touring work is that there's a real challenge to be super minimal. Like what's the least number of tools that I need? What's the like most, efficient set of clothes I can bring, like I just you're boiling your life down to like, 2 weeks worth of t-shirts and underwear and like a couple pounds of tools that is sort of like, okay, this is all I need to survive and do my job, which is really the opposite of my experience when I'm at home, where I just have a lot of stuff and it's, I don't know, that's something that always appealed to me about the travel aspect, is just kind of boiling everything down to the bare essentials. And that's something I miss about it when I'm not doing it, for sure. It's just the minimalism of it.
And to Jesse's point, I totally agree with that. I love it. And I don't know about you guys, but like one of the biggest thrills that I get is when you're out and things are going wrong and you don't actually have all the things that you need. And you have to kind of MacGyver something together, and it's like use non-guitar related things to fix guitar problems. Like, you know, when you show up like a brand new like custom guitar that's just showed up and you've flown across the ocean with it, and you know it's popping out and you're in Tokyo on a Sunday and you don't have like the necessary things that, and you go into the kitchen at the venue, you find a sponge, you find some toothpicks, and you cobble something together and you like make it happen. Like that's one of the most exciting things for me personally. But I don't know if you guys get that thrill as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I remember vividly. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that's always been a thing for me too. Is like one of the things that draws me to it is just the constant troubleshooting and constant like problem solving. And even if it's not like an actual problem, it's like making it better. Always making the show better, making the gig better, making your life easier if you can. Like that's always been something that's attracted me to it. You know, it can get kind of, you know, repetitive sometimes, but I always enjoy, not necessarily when there's a problem, but when there's something I can like wrap my brain around and actually like do some critical thinking about and try to fix. Like what Dan was saying, like sometimes you got to make something happen that realistically you shouldn't be able to make happen, but you do, you know, you have to. It's part of the gig.
MacGyver aspect.
Yeah, I always find that enjoyable, you know.
How do you guys actually go about getting ready to go out on the road? Like, what's the process for getting all the gear together, choosing what stuff the artist is taking out? I don't know how much input you guys actually have in that.
For me, it's just advanced communication. You know, with Jason, I can just text him and say, "What do you want to take out? You know, is this what we're looking at?" And it's really easy. Different artists are different that way, but for me, it's always been super plain. What do you want? Cool, we'll grab it.
What about gear that comes in the middle of the tour? I mean, I know I see a lot of guys coming into the shop who are, you know, whether it's you guys or the artists you work for, who are stuck in New York for a couple of days, have a day off, and they come in and buy new guitars. Is that like throwing a monkey wrench into the equation, or is that just another kind of fun challenge to work around for you guys?
Yeah, yes to all. And it's funny to me because it's just dawning on me that you're probably responsible for a bunch of the curveballs that the other 5 of us have received in the middle of a tour. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
I like to make it work, Michael.
Yeah.
I definitely learned to love it. Like, you know, there'd be certain points where, you know, everybody goes to like a pedal company and then every player comes back with a box full of pedals. And it's like, you know, they walk on to sound check time and all of a sudden everyone starts ripping their pedal boards apart at the same time. And like, in that case, if you're the only tech, you're just like, oh my God, like I wired all of these pedal boards to size, like every cable's made to size, and just seeing it all explode at once is kind of like a panic inducing thing. But you're like, all right, cool. Like if this is what's going to make it fun for you to play, like, let's do it. Rip it apart. Like I'll build it again after. It's fine.
But I think it's really funny that like, even in those times, like when people, you know, sometimes artists want to make decisions last minute and you're just like, man, this is a rough idea, but it's like, you kind of have to roll with it. It's like that. I just think that line from Blazing Saddles where, you know, he's talking about being the Waco kid. And he's like, oh, yeah, you know, you must have been the fastest on the West or whatever. And he's like, yeah, check it out. And he shows his hand. And he's like, yeah, but this is my shooting hand. And it's just like, it's kind of that element where it's like, it doesn't matter, you know, if you feel like this inside, if you're, you know, nervous or anxious about what's happening, it's like you kind of have to like still just keep that level, cool head and just roll with whatever chaos is going on and just kind of, you know, learn to love it, really.
It's always exciting when somebody brings in a brand new piece of gear after sound check before the show, like, I want to use this tonight. And you're like, are you sure? It sounded great in the shop. Well, I'm sure it did, but maybe we should wait till after sound check. No, I want to use it tonight. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And then midway through the show, they go, hey, can you swap that other pedal back in? You're like,
Yeah.
It's right here because I knew it was going to happen. Let's work on it tomorrow.
I've definitely had occasions where that happens, and then halfway through the first song, they look over and they're like, "Switch it out," and you're like, "Now, like in the middle of the verse now?" And they're like, "Yep."
Yeah.
All right.
I can't do the second verse like this. It's got to be now.
Yeah. I like it.
I think the moral of the story is just never let them see fear on your face ever.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah, if your guy sees you panicking, it's all downhill from there. You never want to seem calm and cool and collected at all times, even if you're melting down inside.
Yeah. We have the inside joke that anybody who makes this face at a piece of gear or something, it's done.
Yeah, if you get wide-eyed
I
at
don't at
it.
least pretend you're like, okay, I'm working through the process, but you can't ever do this.
Have any of you actually been in the position where you had to say no to a piece of gear? Like, there's no way we can make this work, or is it just always kind of figure out a way to make it work?
I have.
Usually I feel like you just have to figure out how to make it work, but there are certain times where you do have to just kind of like very coolly and calmly be like, oh, I'm going to have that run and it's going to be great tomorrow. And like kind of have to like finesse that. But, usually, and sometimes it's more exciting to just make it happen personally. But you do need to know when to like play that cool and be like, oh yeah, great. Tomorrow's awesome. That's a cool day, manana.
I mean, I don't.
And it's not a card you can play all the time either.
No, for sure.
You got to hold on to that one.
Yeah.
No, but at the same time, like there's never been any harm really in being like, hey, like let's do it tomorrow. Let's tackle it tomorrow because if the artist realizes you're saying like, hey, this might put you in a spot you don't want to be in, then they'll understand. Most will understand. Some of them will be like, no, it's happening. And you're like, all right, well, we're gonna make it happen, but tomorrow will be better, I promise.
Yeah.
But there's always that part of it.
I think that really plays into the psychology element of our job too. And first thing that jumped into my mind was for about 3 years, I was working for Kanye West and his musical director and DJ in different roles. And Kanye would routinely make very like left of field technical requests that were often just totally impossible given the time frame.
You don't say.
And no,
Really?
and you literally could not say no. Like saying no was the last thing you wanted to say. But a lot of the times I realized that it was kind of just a test. He didn't expect, if you said yes, that was also a big mistake because obviously you were making a promise you couldn't keep. So it was just sort of like he was a lot of times throwing curveballs just to see how people would react. And if you could calmly say, well, we can try to do it this way tomorrow, or this is what we need to make that happen, and just actually break it down, he would completely accept that as a, as an answer. But if you kind of either went too far in the direction of being like, oh yeah, sure, or like, no, that's impossible, those were just basically like firing offenses. So it was real interesting to kind of figure out how to like come up with an answer that was satisfying and also just honest. I think that was mostly what he was really looking for, was somebody who wasn't just going to like have a deer in the headlights moment, which we all do sometimes. But
So I think you just gave everybody who may ever work for Kanye a huge tip right there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, there'd be people who were brand new, and the people who'd been around for a little while would see something like that happening, and you just kind of be like, oh no, don't say no, or something like that. Or like people would kind of make an excuse, and you'd just be like, oh no, don't stop right now. Like, do not make an excuse. Don't make excuses and don't say no. Those are like two cardinal rules right there. But that applies to a lot of people, artists, I think.
Out of curiosity, as a guy who grew up like, looking through guitar magazines and looking at like Keith Richards' like lineup of 20 vintage instruments, are a lot of the guys you're working with taking vintage stuff out, or is it primarily new gear on the road these days?
It's usually a mixture of stuff. It seems like, in my experience, it's like you're getting stuff that's showing up from companies all the time, and then you have things that are showing up from yard sales, and it's like it's a game of making it all happen. So
Yeah.
So I'll ask you guys this collectively: what's the like worst yard sale instrument you've ever had thrown before you that you had to make work on the fly?
Oh.
Everybody's thinking. I like it.
I remember with Foo Fighters, I think that we were doing Saturday Night Live, and Pat had picked up a really kind of a low budget import guitar that day, And literally, well, wanted to go onto the show like without even really getting to try it out. And he would do that on occasion too, even like with festivals and things. He would just, hand you something at the last second and put my strings on it, and let's just try it, having never plugged it into an amp before. And he would just go out there and just rip through it, and it always worked. It was kind of amazing. I really love that fearlessness.
Yeah, there's a charm in that for sure.
Yeah.
Fearlessness and great luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was doing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I was doing Telluride, like Blues and Brews, one of those festivals at Telluride a number of years ago with Jim James, and it had been raining like all day, and it was one of those mornings when we were in at 6:30 and all a little bit beat up, and he called me that afternoon. He said, I just bought this old like Gibson Barney Kessel model, and it was old, and it was great guitar, but it wasn't right for the show, so I had about 45 minutes to put like a little bit of work into it and have it ready for changeover, basically. And it was a cool guitar. It was the only time I ever messed with it. But yeah, I had a quick turnaround on a pretty big time instrument in that one. That was like there's no excuse for that guitar to really play poorly or sound bad, just because it's 100% badass. And if it wasn't performing, it was definitely going to be my fault. So kind of high pressure there, but not a garage sale find by any means. But one to treat with a little bit of sensitivity for sure.
A pretty good one we had wasn't necessarily pawn shop buy, but it was a similar kind of level. It was we were doing a Corona festival in Mexico, and we were a couple hours away from it, and we were having all these freight troubles. And basically, we found out a couple hours before the show that none of our gear had showed up and wasn't going to show up at all. So we had maybe 3 hours or so to piece together an entire show of whatever spares that the backline company had, which is like, I'm sure you guys have had real hit or misses with backline in other countries, but just piecing all this together from whatever they had at the backline company. And then luckily a couple crews like Green Day's crew and maybe one or two other ones just kind of opened up their work boxes. It was like, oh, hey, here's an old MXR micro amp. You can use that. Here's a spare tuner, and just like piecing together a main stage show in a couple hours, which is pretty fun. But
yeah, that's awesome.
I kind of live for that stuff, man. That's a hoot.
We did a festival one time in Detroit, and we had just flown in from Kuala Lumpur. We landed. By the time we got to the festival, it already started, and we were running late. So I can't remember who was on before, some radio show like Flow Rider or somebody was on like before us. We showed up right when his set started. We had like 40 minutes again to pick through what was left of the back line, put this show together, and try to make it happen at this festival after we just gotten off like, however long that flight is, coming into Detroit after not, being overseas for, 6 weeks or whatever we were. It was, we made it happen, but it was less than fun.
Yeah, doing a gig while battling deep vein thrombosis is not really on the list of things to do.
Right, like we literally got off the plane, got in the van, and went straight to the gig, and then like hey, set changes in 40 minutes, and here's what's left of the back line. Sorry, we didn't know whose was whose, so we just let everybody kind of take what they wanted. We're like, you have the stuff we put on the on the list. We're like, maybe, like, cool.
We have this Fender, the Twin.
Yeah. So
those shows that at the very end of it, like when you're all packed up, you're like, that was pretty tight.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure we rolled the backline stuff off. We're just like, yep, we're out of here. Like, you kind of screwed us on this one. We're gonna let you pack it up.
I think some artists really thrive on the limitations of funky gear, and probably my favorite story along those lines. I used to work at this club in DC, the Black Cat, and John Zorn's group Masada was playing, and they just flew in with their horns, and the drummer Joey Barron, who's this just fabulous New York jazz drummer, needed a kit for the show, which they advanced, and the owner of the club, Dante, was a drummer, and he had this really nice like Yamaha drum kit all set up in this room downstairs in the basement where bands would practice. And he takes Joey down there, and my buddy Nick was doing sound, and we're all there kind of like, okay, Joey, here's here's this drum kit. And he just looks right past it. And he's like looking into the corners of this practice space. And he's like, well, what about this? And he starts pulling all these funky, messed up, like mismatched drums that I think most of them Dante had from his like drum kit when he was 14. Just like, oh, here, I'll use this little floor tom as a kick and I'll just put it on its side. And he literally pulls together just these broken drums out of the corners of this practice space and pulls them all up on stage. And Dante was like horrified, like, oh my God, this is a disaster. And then he sets up the kit. My buddy Nick, who was doing sound, Joey was just like, yeah, just put one mic on this whole kit, just one like 57 on a stand right above it. And even my buddy Nick doing sound was like, that's just crazy. Like none of this makes sense. And man, he killed it. It sounded so fucking good. And none of us could, I mean, we're all just kind of watching it like, all right, clearly that guy could just take a couple cardboard boxes and some chopsticks and make it sound incredible, So, but clearly and he was having a ball too. He was just smiling like a little kid the whole time he was playing. It was amazing.
True musicianship right there. Like that's like the true test of an entertainer right there. But on another point, Jesse, who did the jukebox? Who decided what was in there at the Black Cat? Because that's my favorite jukebox, like anywhere in the country.
I'd say Dante probably gets a lot of the credit for that.
Oh man, that is such a good hang over there. Are they still doing all right over there? I haven't been in the Black Cat in a while.
It's been years, man. I don't know.
Really?
They're still hanging out. I know it's still there for sure.
So all you guys have gotten to work for some pretty killer guitar players. I know half the reason I've stayed in this business is because I get to get my hands on instruments that I probably would have no business and no ability to put my hands on otherwise. Any favorite standout instruments, things that you got to play that just like absolutely awed you, floored you?
A good story that I was thinking about earlier when it comes to artists with funky vintage gear. I was taking care of Neil Young's amps as his amp tech. He has the same gear that he's been touring with forever. He has like this early 50s Les Paul and like a Tweed Deluxe and all this crazy funky old gear. And he has golden ears too. Like he can hear stuff that I couldn't hear, but I certainly know that it was what he was hearing was real. But the funniest thing about it is none of the guitar techs that I worked with for him or anybody really on the crew could make his rig sound anywhere close to the way he made it sound. Like you'd be trying to get it to do certain things as he had asked for. And then as soon as he picked up his guitar, it would just sound like him. It was just nobody could get even people who could play his songs and knew all the licks and everything. It just, you couldn't get the tone even close to what his fingers would do. It was so weird. And I think that's true for so many players. It's like, despite all the gear and vintage stuff and, all of that, so much of their tone is their fingers and their way they play and their attack. And it's kind of like, that's one of the things that fascinates me. It's mysterious how much of that tone is really just in their fingertips somehow. I don't even know.
Totally agree with all that.
Yep.
I remember about 15 years ago, I had the good fortune of being able to hold Hendrix's white Woodstock Strat in my hands and really being kind of floored, at how heavy it was, but also like the neck edges were rolled. And it was so unusual and like different from what I had imagined it to be. I grew up playing on a 72, so I always kind of felt like I knew what his guitar was all about. But I remember it was just startling how strange it was in that. Like it was just so different. It was like Les Paul heavy. It seemed like, just one of those moments that you will never forget. And also asking yourself, how is this real? How is this really happening?
For sure. It's every instrument is so weirdly personal that it certainly doesn't matter, how much somebody paid for it. But it is, going back to what Jesse was saying about it really being in like Neil's hands and whatnot. It's like, no one can sound like Neil. Like Neil sounds like Neil and that's it. But also like part of Neil's thing is old black and like a sick Tweed Deluxe or any of these other things. Like Neil's not going to sound as much like Neil with like a Telly and a Supro. It's different combinations work with everybody else, and To me, it's always like about finding, and this is true for the gear that I like to pick up for myself. I like to find stuff that, like, I'm cool with something like directing how I'm going to play, like influencing me one way or the other. But I also, like, once I get there, I don't want to be limited by it. So that's kind of like what I think about when I'm like finding gear for an artist, or even just like developing my own opinion about gear that an artist may have. Like, speaking of 59 bursts, Jason has a 59 burst as well. It was Ed King's. It's called the Red Eye, and it's a really, really super special guitar, and it does stuff that no other guitar that I've ever played can really do, just because of a number of factors. But Jason's a pretty nasty guitar player, and he's nastier on that guitar than he is on some of the others. So it's a combination of things, and not being limited in what you're doing, I think. So like a big time great guitar, like it might cost 2,000% more than a really good version of it. But that 2,000% more, it might buy you 5% more. It's just kind of like that really specific high-end market. You're just the rate of return, what you're getting to what you're paying is lower, but it's the only way to get some of that stuff. If you want a guitar to sound like it's got like a great old double white in it, like it's hard to do that without a great old double white. I'm not going to pay $2,000 for a Klon, but like I think it's a little bit better. And it goes across the board, but it's case by case across the board. But just not being limited is kind of what I always look towards.
Yeah, it's funny. It's diminishing returns, but like you guys all said, there's something about the fingerprint of a player that I think probably trumps a lot of that stuff. We used to have a guy who came in the shop as a session player named Mark Copley, and it was hysterical. He'd always look at vintage guitars and he'd fall in love with something. And I think one day he looked at me, he's like, man, I get so inspired by these instruments. Sometimes you play some of the old ones and they just have this tone that the other ones don't have. Then I take it home and listen to recordings of me, and I just sound like myself on it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guitars like that I've encountered over the years. Like, McCready's got some 59s. He's got all kinds of cool vintage gear that when I play it, I'm like, that sounds cool. When he plays it, you're like, there it is. It's like, I can't make it sound like that. Like Jesse said, so much comes from the fingertips. It's insane. And, it's like, man, these are rad guitars, but I can't get them to sound like him or even close. And they're just not, like it's partly me. It's probably the way he plays it. It's a thing for sure. And it's interesting that how big of a gap there is between two players on the same instrument, the same rig, everything else. Because there'll be days when I go and like I'm sound checking, line checking a rig, and I'm like, it sounds weird today. Something's up. And then your dude comes in and he picks it up and he's like, man, it sounds great. And you're like, it sounds good when you play it, not when I play it. But cool. Glad you're stoked.
I usually have a different response in that situation. It's just like, yeah, no shit, it sounds awesome.
I know. I'll start using that answer now. Yeah, of course.
Duh, Mike McCready.
There's a great line in a Jim Jarmusch movie about a guitar and how every note, every melody that's ever been played on that guitar actually has changed its molecular structure. And I think there's some truth to that with vintage instruments, especially ones like what Dan was saying about a guitar that has this like incredible, history of players and owners. Whether or not it's just something that's perceived in the mind of the player, or whether it's something that's totally real, that all of that history, all of that like love and music and everything that's gone through that instrument has changed it, and that's part of the magic of vintage instruments, especially ones with like a real history in terms of players and music that's been made on them. And I think that's definitely kind of undeniable.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but it's like, I kind of don't trust a guitar till it's seen the floor a few times. I kind of feel like they end up sounding better. I don't know if it's just like a mental thing that I like it more, I trust it more, it feels better to me, but it's like, I don't know, man, there's something about it.
Plus the ones that are beat are the ones that have been played. Like someone found something special in that guitar and kept wanting to pick it up, and there's all the wear. And the ones that are sitting mint under a bed for 40 years are the ones that nobody felt drawn to particularly, you know?
And man, that's what kind of kills me sometimes too, is that like, I know everyone has the right to be collectors and be enthusiasts and stuff, but it's like, when you think about how many of the like 59 bursts are like all, and sorry for, you know, you guys and Rudy's, I don't know if you know more about this than we do, but it's like, isn't there like a large percentage of like all the 59 bursts are all owned by the same kind of billionaire fella, and they all kind of sit in the vault like unplayed? That kind of just like breaks my heart a little bit, you know? I feel like they should be out
Definitely
there.
a bunch of guys who have a ton of them stashed, and it is a little bit sad.
Yeah.
You know, one of the best things, you know, working with Mike has been amazing, but one of the best things he ever said to me, he's got all these cool vintage guitars on the road and stuff. He goes, I'm roughing my gears. Like, man, they're not museum pieces. They're players, and I'm going to play them like they're players. So he's not afraid to take off that 59 and slide it across the floor if that's what he feels like doing at the moment. And he's just like, you know, like I was watched in horror a few times. He's like baseball bat mic stands down with his guitars and stuff like that. I'm just like, you know what? It's your guitar, man. You can do whatever you want.
I love it though.
You know, like in again, it's just like he just wants to play, and he's like, it's not a museum piece. It's my guitar. I'm going to play it, and I'm going to do it how I want to do it. Like, man, I back it. I think it's awesome.
I mean, it's a tool at the end of the day. I mean, I think there's
Totally.
that thing in the vintage world in general. I feel like, I don't know, sometime maybe 15 years ago, it shifted a lot from like, oh my God, this thing has so much vibe. It sounds great. I love it. It feels fantastic, to like, well, mine's cleaner than yours. And for me, it's always nice working with you guys who are professionals and the people you work for, is that so many of them are like, dude, it needs new frets. Put new frets on it. You know, got to swap a cap. You know, if you have to, you swap a cap.
Right. Yeah, it's. I've definitely had those conversations where there's the guys like, it's broken, it needs to be fixed. You know, or the guy's like, oh, can you just repair it? You know, you fix that. You know, can you make that pot that's completely broken work? Can you do them? Like, well, not the way you want it to, but we can try until, you know, like, well, I don't want to replace anything. It's like, it's not going to do you very much good on stage if it doesn't work. You know,
like, you don't blame MacGyver so much.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a
is
certain
like
point.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
At a certain point, you have to like bite the bullet and put that part in a bag and be like, you can sell this off with it when you want to get rid of it. You know.
Yeah.
But
and I feel like that always is like one of those tough decisions to make, especially like if artists like involve you in that, where it's like, you know, do we keep embracing the wabi-sabi of this instrument where it's delightfully wonky in all the right ways? Or do we kind of rebuild it and make it just roadworthy, where it's like every night it works the same, it sounds the same? And it's, you know, I don't always know that there is like a perfect answer on that, but it's definitely a interesting bridge to have to cross, you know?
Sometimes guitars that have been broken a bunch of times, they sound better each time they're fixed. And I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but especially Gibsons, which, you know, the headstocks kind of break if you look at them sideways. I mean, I think especially of like, you know, a couple of the SGs that Ian and Fugazi played, they had their headstocks and necks broken off multiple times. And I swear to God, those guitars sounded better every time they were glued together. And I think sometimes part of that is just, you know, there's these little flaws in the wood and stuff that they were going to break sooner or later. And after they've broken and then been glued back together, it's actually stronger. The whole instrument is the way that the repair has actually made the transmission vibrations better than it was to begin with. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it's psychological as well, but I feel like a lot of the guitars I've glued back together, it's like, I feel like they sound just as good, if not better. And I don't know how much of it is like you're saying, actually the physical composition, but I just feel like there's some like beauty in like feeling like that there's, you know, it starts off from this tree that's had its own life, it's lived, it's died, you know, supposedly supposed to be done, but then we reincarnate it into this new living, breathing, like functional piece that someone can connect with. And then it kind of dies another death, and then, you know, you glue it back together and it's kind of alive again. I just think there's some beauty in like restoring and repairing and giving something another life that, you know, like I said, I don't know how much of it's psychological. That's like, hey, this sounds just as good, if not better. But I don't know. I get a kick out of it. It seems like you guys are all kind of in that world as well.
Certainly.
I don't think I don't think it's too unlike, like how houses settle and things like that. Like a guitar over time, as it gets played, its vibration gets beat into it. It no longer really exists as a tree anymore. It's known itself, or it's existed as a functional human interactive instrument. And I think there is really a change from when a guitar is brand new versus, I think that vibration does a lot to settle everything into it.
For sure. Like some people. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say I love reading about some people in like the classical world that when they get like a new, upright bass or a big cello or something like that, they'll leave it up against a speaker, just playing continuous music, just vibrating through it to try and age it, make it sound like an older instrument. And as a builder, so I assume you are quite into that idea, huh?
Yeah, I even the analogy is kind of like a baseball mitt. Over time, it's just going to get beat in to where it's like, when it's really there, you can tell that it's been used. It's an extension of the player, and you've also adapted to it too. I remember playing in bands and being so particular to a certain guitar and just loving the neck, and then taking that guitar out of circulation and putting it in a case and revisiting it like a decade later. And you're thinking like, what was I thinking? This is the worst neck in the world. But you adapt to it. And like you play it, you live on that thing so much that you don't even think about it.
So all you guys have been on the road for a number of years. You get backstage, you're playing, obviously you guys have all worked with serious people. Anybody ever go fanboy on somebody backstage?
Oh,
have any of us?
Any of you, yeah. You ever just get someone like, I work with Jason Isbell, but holy crap, that's Bob Dylan.
There's been a couple times where I've had to tech in front of Ian MacKaye in DC, when you're at like the 930 Club or like at a festival somewhere, and like I have my little work box set up and I got my minor threat patch there, and he's just standing behind me. I'm just like sweating bullets. I'm like, man, there's not many people that could like kind of rattle my cage a little bit, but like he's definitely one where I'm just like, every time I see him, it's I don't know, get that little heartthrob of someone who's like meant so much to informing who you become and like your path in life. So, but yeah, not a lot of people, I don't think, got me that worked up. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
I remember in the early 90s, I was with Nirvana. We were doing a couple shows in Brazil, and L7 was along for the ride, and their guitar tech and I had sort of struck up a friendship, and we started hanging out all the time. And I remember at one point, Kurt started asking me a bunch of questions about him. I remember kind of thinking like, why do you like their guitar tech so much? Like, I was feeling like, oh my God, this is not good. And then after a while, somebody told me that, hey, that's the guy you've been hanging out with is Ian MacKaye. And
wow.
And I realized like Kurt was totally intimidated by him. He was really like kind of afraid to like get too close to him, because I think that they differed in a lot of opinions about lifestyle. And so, like taking care of oneself. And so I think I can only speculate that was probably what it was. But yeah, just such a funny thing, like to not connect those dots and to have that.
Yeah, those are the experiences that always stand out to me, like where you've been interacting with someone for a little bit or just chatting with someone, and then you realize that they are somebody that, by and large, people would be freaked out by. I haven't had a whole lot of experiences where I've like gurmed out on anyone, but we were doing the Bridge School benefit years ago, and someone had introduced me to someone, and I was speaking to him for 10 minutes before I realized it was Graham Nash. And he was the nicest guy I've probably ever met in my life. But like in that moment, it was a busy day and things were a little crazy, and I had no idea that I was speaking to one of the members of Crosby, Stills and Nash. But those are the ones that kind of sneak up on me that I'll remember back to, because I'm like, oh my God, you idiot. How did you not know?
Yeah.
So for all you guys moving into new venues, venue to venue, everyone, you got to tweak presumably every night. I know they're all kind of individual challenges, and your job is not just plugging people in, it's kind of constantly tweaking that stuff. Are there any venues that are just particularly nightmares for you? Is there like a consensus that certain places are just horrible to actually try to set up a rig in?
One that jumps out to mind is one of the smaller clubs in Chicago. Man, I can't remember what it's called. It's much more punk rock. It's like Double Door or kind of one of those. And it's in like a real central area. And you go in and you sound check and, you know, you meter the power. It's running at like 115 or 120. You're like, this is great. These tube amps sound awesome. And then if you're playing in the summertime and everyone gets home and they crank up their air conditioners, you get this voltage drop that's unreal. Like I metered the power during the show because everything sounded terrible. And I think it got down to like 98 or 99 volts. And it's just like, they're not happy at all. But it's kind of fun. Like you really kind of learn to love this stuff. I mean, it's happened at festivals too. Like I remember some festival in Italy we did. It was the same thing where it was like, you know, they ran the entire festival off of one single 200 or 400 amp circuit. So everything was fine during sound check. But then as soon as like, you know, it's dark out and they turn up the PA and they turn up the lighting rig and the power drops below 100 volts and like all the amps start shutting down, like, and it's nuts. So, you know, basically power things are the biggest things. You know, you have rough audio ones, but I don't know. I feel like those are a lot more expected than some of the crazy power situations you get into. Or like South American club shows, those can be fun as well. No grounds in the venue, you know what I mean? Like good stuff.
Yes.
Real good stuff.
A lot of smaller
as much as I love it. Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as much as I love the venue, the Capitol Theater in New York is right across the street from that train station where the transformers are above ground. And it just, you know, there's just a massive amount of induction that you just can't really carve out.
Yeah, have fun with those P90s in there, yeah?
Yeah, no kidding.
It's one of those, it's the kind of gig where you like put a piece of tape on the floor and you tell your dude, stand facing towards that and it'll be kind of usable.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a squatted venue in, God, what's it called? It's Flex or something. It's in Vienna and it's in an old metro station. And even though they've closed it off from the main line, the metro trains still run like just right behind the wall of the venue. So it's like whenever a train passes, which is like every like 15 or 20 minutes, there's this huge power surge and everything in the PA and everything on stage goes, and the whole place is like rattling because of this train going by. Kind of awesome, actually.
It's always the trains. There's that place. It's like a club in Sacramento. It's the same thing. Like the train line runs right behind. Yeah. And they're like, well, when the trains stop running, usually by the time the headliner's on, then, you know, the noise floor is down a bit. But I've never seen anybody, you know, stop the buzz in the meantime. And then you're like, okay, that's a challenge. So then you spend the next hour trying every trick, you know, trying to quiet down amps for sound check and everything. But always the trains.
I got one more question for you guys before we close up for the day. What's everybody playing at home right now? We're all stuck here. Everybody got a favorite thing that they're just messing around with at the moment?
Ooh, I've been building a bunch of stuff. And I also did restorations pretty well. But here's one I just finished. It's kind of wild.
Nice.
So
That's like the
I'm
one
playing that a lot. It's pretty fun. And also,
Tim is playing from Randy Carlisle.
Yeah, it's identical. In fact, I think
cool.
he was wanting another one, so this might wind up going to him. I had a stack of wood in the corner, so I started making an 8-string bass.
Nice.
So
Sweet.
That's kind of wild. Kind of fun.
Cool.
Another one that's really fun was a restoration of it's a Travis Bean prototype. And it was stored in the case for 40 years with this foam rubber block, which destroyed the finish on it. And so it looked like a lunar surface. And I remember talking to Mark McElway, the guy who built this about 15 years ago, and he said that the reason we used lacquer was that it was infinitely repairable. And I remember about 10 years ago shooting some lacquer and getting some bubbles in it, and then going back after it with some lacquer thinner and getting the finish to sort of fall apart again, and the bubbles came out. So I went at this thing with some solvents, with some toluene and some lacquer thinner, and I was able to get that. I mean, it looked like it'd been through a fire, and I was able to restore it. That is the original finish on there. And so it was really fun because as a kid, I just never imagined that was even possible. And
nice one.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
Big
that's great.
man.
yes, it's just
That's awesome.
yeah, it's a fun piece of history to be able to kind of turn back the clock and get it looking like it did the day they finished it in '72, a few years before the actual production run started. That's what I got.
Awesome.
This is my favorite guy I've been playing. I got this in Wales, like from a shop, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I got it for like $200. It's got no name on it. It's like this really silly, like sparkly salmon SG knockoff, and it's supposed to be the shittiest guitar in the world, but I freaking love it. You know, I added this little bridge. I forget what you call it, the vibrola or whatever, but it's funny because it's like they made the guitar out of like a piece of IKEA furniture that was like sitting on the sidewalk in the rain. So it's like when I went to drill into it, you know, it's just fucking crumbling apart. It's a disaster. But this guitar sucks, but it's just the most delightfully wonky thing that I really love. So I really like that guy. And then this is the Stooges could probably be my favorite band of all time. So I got really into James Williams and had this Les Paul Custom. So I kind of like, I picked up this like for a couple $100, this little Aria Pro 2, and I did it all up just like his. So I put the little Leopard 80 on there and everything. So that's just kind of my geeky little, I don't know. I love my like $200 guitars. They're kind of my favorites. I put some love into
Nice.
and fuck around with, you know.
I
How
have
about you,
a
Brad? What do you
Nash
have back there?
Jazzmaster. Bunch of crap, but there's one in particular. It's like a Nash Jazzmaster that I got a while back, and it's one that I brought on tour for like a hotel room guitar, and like both Against Me and Gaslight Anthem, it'd be like, let me see that thing, and then it spent the next like 3 years on tour back and forth between both of those bands, getting played on stage every night. And speaking to the point of, you know, guitars that are getting put through their paces a bit more, it does have something now that it's back home that like. It's just that much more broken in. It just has that much more to it. And it just sounds awesome. Like anytime I go back to it, I'm like, yeah, this is the one.
Cool. I've got this guy that I don't know. I bought this like 20 years ago. It was like a limited edition thing that Gibson did that kind of combined all of the like a bunch of appointments from customs and classics and standards, like all the stuff that I liked from each one into this one guitar. So, and this is kind of my, like, I split time between Nashville and New York City. My girlfriend lives in New York, and we were up there before we came down to Maryland. I'm in her parents' basement right now. If you can tell with like the cow made out of a quilt and like family pictures in the back. My girlfriend's the blonde, not a big deal, really.
Don't want to brag about it.
But this is, but yeah, this is kind of like my New York City guitar. Like I have one of the Milkman, the amps, and a few pedals up here. But other than that, I'm like missing all of my cool old stuff. All that's at home.
I always joke that for guitar, it's like I have no cool gear at all. I just play with everybody else's. The guitar I've been playing the most, I got a 72 reissue Telly Deluxe that I pulled all the electronics out of. I've got one humbucker wired straight to the output, and I just rock that. No knobs, no nothing. Yeah, and I went to the dark side and I bought a Fractal, and I've been messing with that thing, and I love it as much as everybody likes cool gear, like cool vintage gear. I mean, this thing is awesome. And just been messing with that stuff, and yeah.
Jesse, you still going to talk to him using the Fractal?
Oh yeah, you know, it's funny. Like, it's only happened to me once, but I took care of a guitar rig that was Ableton based, and it replaced 2 stereo Marshall stacks and this giant pedal board, and then in came this like Ableton thing that was like a laptop and a Mode 2 and a couple DIs. And I mean, this was like in a stadium or a, you know, arena type context, and I have to say that fucking rig sounded great, and it sounded so much better than the stereo Marshall stacks and pedal board. Like I couldn't believe it. But especially in that context of like when you're in this giant reverberous like thing where just microphones and amps and all that stuff are just a bunch of headaches, really. And you get something that's consistent every night. And especially in that case, the guitar player had tracked most of the record in the box anyway, so he was able to just pull his like plugins and tones like directly out of the files that he recorded the record with and then have them on stage. It was like sort of undeniable. And I can't say I would have been able to get in there and fix anything, but it sure sounded great every night when I and it was kind of nice to like, all right, fire up a laptop, like, you know, you've got spares of everything, and it sure made life easy. So I'm not complaining about it, although I need to get into fractal stuff. I've avoided it thus far. This is the guitar I've been just kind of have next to the couch down here right now. It's a baritone Strat that actually Ernie built this thing years ago. I bought it from Guitar Shop down in Tacoma, Guitar Maniacs, and I really love baritones. So this thing's just been kind of my noodling while I'm watching TV guitar.
Is that red Metal Flake one?
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks everybody for being here. This has been a ton of fun. I'm glad I got to hang out with you all. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Everyone out there, again, if you get a chance, go check out livefromnowhere.org. They're really trying to help a lot of the people we know, a lot of people like yourselves who are stuck at home and unable to tour right now. And yeah, thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
It's fun.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Be safe.
Good to see y'all again.